Morning, guys. It's Tuesday, May 20th, 5:26 a.m. Central Time. Grain markets are higher across the board this morning. July corn futures up 4.25 at 451 3/4. July soybeans up 1.5 at 1052 1/4. July Chicago wheat up 9.25 cents at 538 1/4. July Kansas City wheat up 12 at 534 3/4. July spring wheat up 7.25 at 592 3/4. Let's start off with weather this morning.
So the radar is active over the U.S. Corn Belt early this morning. Storm systems sit over large parts of Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. Rainfall over the past 72 hours has favored portions of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, and the Mid-South. Following this morning's storm system, additional rain is expected during the next 10 days. Total Corn Belt coverage is expected to be widespread through the 16-day period based on GFS model data this morning.
Hey, Mackenzie, let's go back to the past precip. Did you get the rain in Nebraska that I promised you?
We sure did. It was so funny. I think the day after you said that, it rained and it was incredible.
I didn't promise anything, but the models did. The models promised rain for the driest parts of the Western Corn Belt. And I don't know, it wasn't everywhere, but it looks like the coverage in Nebraska was decent. Looks like the coverage in Western Iowa was decent. Southeast South Dakota had been dry. Looks like the coverage was decent. As we move forward here, the forecast has again shifted dry for Nebraska, for Western Iowa, for parts of South Dakota, at least drier than normal, not totally dry. Now, the Corn Belt on average, according to our friends at Crop Profit, will see above normal rainfall. But what we've been told, a lot of the weather forecasters have discussed the possibility of dryness, or dare I say drought, this summer. And if said dryness is to occur, the general theme that we've heard from the weather forecasters is that it's going to be a Western Corn Belt thing, and that you're going to see a divide, that the East and the Central Corn Belt's probably not going to be your problem area, and the West could be the problem area. So because we just had these rains, I guess there's not a ton of concern about that right now. But as we move forward, if the forecasts stay dry for Western Iowa, for Nebraska, for South Dakota, those could be areas of concern, certainly. Let's go to crop progress.
So, U.S. corn and soybean planting continues to outpace the 5-year average. Corn planting was 78% complete through Sunday, compared to 62% last week and 73% on average. States that have planted 80% or more of the crop include Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Texas. States with 65% planted or less include Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Soybean planting was reported at 66% complete nationally versus 48% last week and 53% on average. Notably, soybean planting progress was the second fastest in the last 10 years for the week. States that have planted 75% or more of the crop include Arkansas, Iowa, Louisiana, Minnesota, Mississippi, and Nebraska. States with 55% planted or less include Kentucky, Michigan, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, and Tennessee.
As we've discussed recently, the soybean planting statistics versus average, or versus the long-term averages, are not necessarily relevant. Farmers have switched practices. They're planting soybeans before corn for agronomic reasons now. And so the data versus history is skewed. But versus the 5-year average, the only two states that are behind with regard to soybean planting, behind the 5-year average, would be Kentucky. They're 43% planted versus 46 on average. And then Mississippi is 76% planted versus 78 on average. But relative to those long-term averages, soybean planting is 13% ahead of average, or 16% ahead of last year. There are a few states that are behind average with regard to corn planting. Illinois is 74 versus 77 on average. Ohio is 34 versus 48 on average. Kentucky 63 versus 74 on average. North Carolina is a little bit behind, but they're in the 90s in terms of percentages. This is more complicated than just looking at the national numbers. On a national scale, there's no problem. There's no delay. Everything is ahead of schedule. Locally, if you go back and look at the maps, actually, we don't have any a ton of past precip stuff this morning, but there are some delays in the Eastern Corn Belt. You've got delays in places like Ohio, places like Kentucky, places like West Tennessee, places like Michigan, certainly parts of Illinois. And I know that there has been progress made over the last 3 or 4 days. But if you guys are experiencing some of these localized delays, drop us a comment here in the YouTube comment section. We would love to know what's going on in your neighborhood. Let's go to wheat.
So, U.S. winter wheat ratings dropped last week. As of Sunday, the crop was rated 52% good to excellent nationally versus 54% last week and 42% on average. The rating fell below analysts' expectations of 54%, but exceeded the 49% recorded during the same week last year. Despite the decline, the rating was the highest for the week since 2020. The crop is 64% headed nationally versus 53% last week and 58% on average. Meanwhile, the U.S. spring wheat crop was 82% planted nationally as of Sunday versus 66% last week and 65% on average.
If you notice, wheat futures are sharply higher. Well, higher this morning, 8 to 10 cents higher, probably because these crop ratings were a little bit below where the trade had expected them to be. We were looking for an unchanged rating. It was a 2% drop in the good excellent category. I'm looking at the map here, and it looks like Texas dropped. I'm sorry, Texas was up 4%. So there was just a handful of states where ratings were down. But all in all, I mean, in terms of your big like HRW producers, Kansas was actually up 1 percentage point. Oklahoma was up 3%. It looks like Colorado was down 10%. Maybe that's one of your big culprits here. In any case, I don't know that I read a ton into it. Spring wheat planting is ahead. Are we ahead of average by a little bit?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, 3% ahead or a couple percent ahead of average.
Mhm.
The spring wheat market's acted a little bit better. I think that these rains that they've seen in the Dakotas and in Montana, places like that, are seen as being a little bit bearish. But the market has acted okay. There were a couple other wheat stories out this morning. Russia apparently has some frost issues. China has some issues with dryness. U.S. wheat's a little bit more competitive on the export market, so the market has acted a little bit better.
Heavy rainfall could potentially impact Argentina's soybean crop. According to the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange, the crop in northwestern Buenos Aires could suffer substantial yield losses. The persistent rains, which are causing delays in harvest, may cause the exchange to lower its crop outlook of 50 million metric tons. Roughly 1.8 million acres have yet to be harvested in the region. Crop damage is likely to worsen as additional rainfall is forecast in the coming days.
The wires have taken the story and run with it a little bit. I don't really see the impact here. We talked about it yesterday. So here's a map of rainfall during a 5-day period from May 14th through the 19th, so through yesterday. And you can see this really heavy stuff to the east there. But you look at that map side by side with production density, and it looks like the really, really heavy stuff was outside of key soybean production areas. And that's why the markets don't care. Argentina is the number one exporter of soybean meal, and the soybean meal market has not reacted to this at all. Argentina is the number one exporter of soybean oil by a tremendously wide margin, and the soybean oil market has not reacted to this at all. The soybean oil market has been trading biofuel chatter and renewable fuel chatter. So even though this story has circulated, it has not had any impact on the markets.
If you guys have not checked out our premium content, you sure need to do so. Joe, can you tell our viewers about some of our recent premium videos?
Back to some hardcore grain marketing stuff yesterday. Carry and the new crop corn market, thoughts and concerns. This is not a fun video to watch. It's not supposed to be entertaining. This is informational. It's we kind of do a deeper dive into the numbers and exactly what I'm looking for in terms of carry from, say, D's to March corn, D's to May corn. This is corn that you'll harvest this fall and you may consider storing. And what sort of levels should you look for when it comes to capture and carry? Say you've got corn that you're going to roll, got an December HTA, you want to roll it to March, capture, carry. What should you look for? Talked about the history, talked about the current setup. Paul Neiffer was on last week and did an update on the ECAP payments, which most of them have gone out, but we did an update there because there's some more forthcoming. And then Paul told us what he knows about ERP, which is probably more than you know, because it was certainly more than what I know. And there is some news pending there as well that Paul discussed. If you guys want to see the premium stuff, this is a $50 per month subscription. We just send out a ton of information to our premium subscribers every single business day. If you guys are watching on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast, you are seeing a fraction of the stuff that we put out and create. The podcast and YouTube, this is a news show. We cover the headlines of the day. But if you're looking for more strategy type stuff, whether it's cash grain marketing, crop insurance, transition planning, policy, all of that stuff, that's included in the premium content. So if you're somebody who's making the decisions on your farm, this is a deal that you need to sign up for. You can go to standardgrain.com, sign up this morning. We do credit card, Google Pay, Apple Pay, Cash App. Takes like 30 seconds. You can do it on your phone. All the information is super easily accessible on your phone. There's no login instructions. It's just click to play the videos. You just click to read the emails. Absolute piece of cake. Give that deal a shot this morning, guys.
China is claiming that the Trump administration has hindered recent trade talks by warning that the use of Huawei's AI chips may violate U.S. export controls. Last week, the Commerce Department issued guidance highlighting the risks of using the company's chips because they contain U.S. technology. U.S. sanctions have already hampered the Chinese corporation's efforts to develop AI chips, and the latest guidance further complicates its progress. China argues that the warning undermines the consensus reached during trade discussions in Switzerland and has demanded that the U.S. reverse its actions.
Seems like the trade stuff has turned kind of in the wrongish direction, just very slightly in the last few days. Scott Bessent made some more hawkish comments about the reciprocal tariffs and said, if we don't make deals, then we're going to, go back to that. And now China's kind of chirping just a little bit. I don't know. We're kind of in, I feel like the tariff trade war headlines, we haven't covered as much lately because there hasn't been as much to cover. There was a 2 or 3 week period where we let off with tariffs like every single day on the show. And things have settled down for a moment, but I have a feeling that there could be a time where it escalates again.
U.S. corn shipments were strong last week, landing near the upper end of pre-report expectations. USDA reported that 68 million bushels of corn were inspected for export during the week ending May 15th. The print was up 32% compared to the previous week and up 39% versus the same week last year. Soybean shipments fell short of expectations at 8 million bushels. The print was down 50% from the prior week, but up 13% compared to the same week last year. Wheat shipments were near the upper end of expectations at 16 million bushels. The print was up 4.6% from the previous week and up a whopping 85% versus the same week last year.
Corn shipments strong like bull. USDA should probably revise again upward its export projection for the current marketing year, which begs a number of different questions. So if we're actually going to end up with a higher export number than currently projected, you're going to end up with an old crop corn carryout in the U.S. that's sub 1.4 billion bushels. Why isn't old crop corn acting better? We're at 451 on the board today for July futures. Given the tightness, I guess the ideas that have floated out there is that USDA is one, possibly overstating feed demand. 2, possibly they're overstating the 2024 crop, or I'm sorry, understating the 2024 crop. It could have actually been bigger than what they're leading on. Or maybe the trade is just so thoroughly convinced that the new crop situation is going to be so incredibly bearish that they're just not that concerned. In any case, there appears to be something amiss. I think one or maybe a few of those things that I just mentioned could be true, but the market is not acting as if the corn balance sheet is as tight as advertised.
USDA reported a flash sale yesterday. U.S. exporters sold 145,000 metric tons of soybean cake and meal to the Philippines for delivery during the current marketing year. This marks the second flash sale of soybean cake and meal since the start of the calendar year, totaling 280,000 metric tons.
Good to see, but you guys saw that meal chart that we had earlier, and that market has not acted well at all. What did cattle do yesterday?
They were mixed. Live cattle were 75 cents to $1.17 higher. Feeders were 27 cents lower to 15 cents higher. Box beef was higher. Choice was up 232 at 354.81, and select was $1.72 higher at 344.11.
So we're kind of in correction mode. Is that what it looks like? Possibly.
I would say so. Yeah.
Outside markets are pretty quiet this morning. Stock market's off just fractionally. Treasury's just a little bit higher. U.S. dollar's a little bit lower. Crude oil's off just a little bit. Pretty quiet. Everybody have a great day today. We'll be back on Wednesday.